I would say the overall goal is making sure that we've got the right talent in the right place at the right time. It takes a curiosity about what are the other possibilities in this organization and stepping into a different part of the business or a different function that may not be sort of what you've experienced to this point in your career. There's not a right way, right? There's just you showing up to be the best you that you can be, and what does that look like for you? What's right for you is going to change over the course of your life at different points, I think, and that's okay. I'm not sure what I want my career to be. Okay, what doors do you want to remain open? And how do you make moves? How do you be thoughtful about your development to keep those doors open? If you build that trust, the relationships across the team, they'll achieve amazing things. But you got to spend the time intentionally doing that as well.
Welcome to the Cultivating Leaders podcast. I'm your host and curiosity captain, Nicole Ursig. If you are ready to lead better, think bigger, and grow faster, you're in the right place. We bring you real conversations with top leaders across food and agriculture, focused on the practical skills and mindsets you need to lead in today's environment. Today's guest is a leader focused on building people, strengthening teams, and driving success across a global organization. Julie Sexton, Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at Land O'Lakes, brings a powerful perspective on what it takes to invest in your workforce while leading at scale. In an industry that spans geographies, cultures, and constant change, leadership isn't just about performance. Great leaders develop people who can sustain that performance long term. If you are leading a team or want to create impact through others, this conversation will challenge how you think and how you lead going forward. Julie, welcome to the pod.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so before we dive into leadership questions, I want to let the audience get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
Tell me, Julie, why a career in HR? What drew you to that?
The ultimate question. I'll be honest. Like I can't say that I'm sitting here today with a long-term goal of having built a career in human resources. It certainly turned out to be a fantastic career, and I have no regrets. As I was in college, I was not familiar with human resources, so I ended up getting a business degree with an HR concentration. Because honestly, I thought I'm not sure about marketing, I'm not sure about operations, I'm not sure about accounting, which were some of the other concentrations at the time. And I thought human resources will work across the board, right? I know I'll be working with other people, right? I know I want to lead eventually, so it was a good place to start. And from that, I ended up doing a couple of internships in human resources, and that really helped me get more grounded in the profession, and it just landed from there, right? It's always been a fascinating area of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no matter what work or what part of a profession you're in, we all have to work with people. So
Yeah.
I love that was your philosophy, and it
Yeah.
has panned out.
Yeah.
For anyone who is not familiar, I think when people think Land O'Lakes, they can think of the butter, but
Yep.
give some perspective on who Land O'Lakes is as a business.
Sure. So Land O'Lakes is a farmer-owned cooperative. We're just over 100 years old, about a $16 billion business by revenue, and we really span the whole food system. So we start from a crop inputs business, which goes to market as Winfield. We have an animal nutrition business, which goes to market as Purina, and then of course our dairy foods business, which is also our company name, so that goes to market as Land O'Lakes. So each of those businesses are about a third of our total revenue, give or take, but it's really working across that entire kind of farm to food agricultural system. And it's a little known that we do have those other parts of our business that are really much more ag focused than our dairy foods business. So um, it's a broader business, all operating as a farmer-owned cooperative, which is makes it a very unique place to be as well.
Absolutely. So tell us, Julie, what does the Chief Human Resources Officer at Land O'Lakes do on a day-to-day basis? Like, what is that job?
Um, that job is, I would say the overall goal is making sure that we've got the right talent in the right place at the right time. So, what are the things that we're trying to accomplish as a business? That informs, all right, now what do we need from a capability perspective, from a leadership perspective? from just skills and knowledge across our organization. So I have the privilege of leading the team then that's focused on how do we get the talent lined up to achieve those business goals, as well as think about the environment and the context that we're providing for that talent to operate in so that they can show up fully and contribute. So on a day-to-day basis, that looks everywhere from thinking about a leadership summit that we're planning for next week across our top leaders. It looks like working as an HR business partner across the executive team. It looks like thinking about leadership succession and how are we building leaders for the long term kind of senior level leadership of the organization. So it's a wide variety. I think the benefit of being in this role in human resources in general is I get the opportunity to work across all of those a bunch of different functions across the entirety of the business and really contribute at the enterprise level as well.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm curious how your role, you've been at Land O'Lakes 27 years, I think. And so that is a journey that I'm sure you've seen the business change and the way that you guys do talent development and leadership development. Talk about what that progression has been like over your time at Land O'Lakes.
Yeah, for sure. And first of all, I would start with, thank goodness that I've seen progression over 27 years, right? Like if we were talking about the same organization that I had started at 27 years ago,
Yeah, that's fair.
everybody just needs to grow and adapt. What I've seen in that evolution is I've seen the organization come together much more as an enterprise, as opposed to very segmented business units. With that has brought a great opportunity then for us to think about the talent experience across that enterprise as well. And we talk about building enterprise leaders so that the value is there's really a greater value in getting those experiences across the business, which also provides, I think, a great talent proposition because this is a great place that you can come and build a career and work in related but also very different industries from CPG to animal nutrition to crop inputs, and multiple different functions, of course. So it creates a great talent proposition as we think more and more about how we drive results as an enterprise.
So, from your perspective, Julie, what does it take to become an enterprise level leader? Because I think Land O'Lakes is not the only organization who is now operating that way, and um, it's is as you've talked, like that is a very large, complex business to think about leading across. So, for someone who's sitting there thinking of like, I want to be the next kind of top executive at an agriculture company like Land O'Lakes, what does it take to become an enterprise leader?
Yeah. I think it takes broadening. It takes a curiosity about what are the other possibilities in this organization and stepping into a different part of the business or a different function that may not be sort of what you've experienced to this point in your career, right? If you think about the visual of an organization as a pyramid, right? So there's sort of broader and there's more individual contributors, and as you move into leadership roles, there are fewer of those. Um, you have more opportunities if your goal is to advance your career into those senior level leadership roles. You're going to have more opportunities at the top the broader you are at the bottom. So use that time early in career, mid-career, to really broaden yourself across the enterprise that you happen to be working in, or like I said, across functions as well. So I really think part of it's that broadening. I think along with that, it's that curiosity and understanding that you've got a lot to learn and being open to learning and exploring in those areas. And then just, being comfortable with ambiguity, which as well, because you're going to step into areas that you don't know much about. And you got to surround yourself with a good team, and learn from them and be comfortable sort of being in that gray space of, I just don't know yet. By the way, I think those are all good characteristics for leading into the future in general. So if it helps you be an enterprise leader at the same time, that's probably a twofer.
Yeah. It's interesting, Julie. You are the second leader that we have talked to that's described your career or an organization kind of as a pyramid, and broadening going out is just as important before going up. And I think that, well, I guess I'm curious your perspective. I think maybe when I was a young leader, I kind of thought about like you become a specialist and you become really good at one thing. And you kind of think like, I'm going to continue to become an expert in this thing to move up. And what I have heard as we've talked to many leaders across this podcast is that doesn't always seem to be the case, especially if you want to go really to the next level. Do you think that's something that's changed in career path, in just like the ways that careers evolve today?
I do think it's changed. I think there's still a space for those deep specialty experts, and we've certainly got some, and you need those roles as well, right? Like we need areas that are just super deep in knowledge. Um, I think there's more sort of general roles that have developed as well. And I think as we have more technology and more information, there's value in having that enterprise view because you can make more sense of the world that's coming at you, the data that's happening in the organization as well. That's not to say that you're also going to be successful because you got with you a really deep specialist as well. So I do think it's possible to have a career in both ways, and I think that's okay. That's really going to come down more to personal choice and how someone wants to build their career and their expertise and what just drives them. Like what's your own internal motivation? You got to start there too. There's not a right way, right? There's just you showing up to be the best you that you can be, and what does that look like for you?
Mhm. I like that. I think too, it's we would just talk to Scott Kay in a former episode of this, and he was talking about his career. It's exactly what you're talking about from an enterprise leader, and that he's like, well, I did sales and I did marketing and I did like he moved around quite a bit, and I think it's interesting as you think about like being able to absorb all of that different perspective and knowledge and lead at a higher level. He's been in the shoes of
Hmm.
almost every one of the leaders that he leads,
Hmm.
and I think about the kind of leaders that I like to work with. If they can speak your language
Right.
or have some, at least they have context,
Yeah.
right? Like they can have it may not be an incredibly deep conversation, but they can go at least a couple
Yeah.
layers down with you. I think those are the kind of leaders we want to work with
Well,
too.
and I think that's the value of broadening, right? You're showing up as curious, you're broadening yourself, not because you need to know how to do everything in all of those specialty areas, but if you're going to lead a broader team, you need to have a working knowledge so you know what questions to ask, how to help your team think about things, right? Because they're the experts and they're going to have more of the answers. Your role as a leader is to show up and help them think and pressure test their thinking and help them, coach them in their development as well. So you need to know enough to be conversant and to
Hmm.
learn. Yeah.
Yeah. What advice do you have for leaders who are maybe in that phase of broadening or looking at a phase of broadening, and it can be a little nerve-wracking in that I'm about to step into something that I've never done before. If maybe I'm an expert in sales and I've always been in sales, or I've always been in marketing or product, and I'm about to step into one of those other roles that like I'm familiar with, but I'm not the expert here and I've got to lead a team.
Yeah. Um, so I would think of a few things. I think of, first of all, use your team, like trust your team, right? They're the experts. So how do you start with onboarding yourself and learning from them? I think there's always value in thinking about what's your external network as well. Where are you learning from? So if you're moving from one function to another or one industry to another, take a look at the external network that you've got and think about how do I need to reset this? How are you engaging with peers at other companies that are doing a similar role? Because you'll learn that way as well. And then I think the combo between those is just have some self awareness. What do you know? What don't you know? How do you need to fill in those gaps? What you know? What do you need to lean on your team to know? Because you don't need to know all of the answers. Again, you need to sometimes generate the conversation and help broader teams problem solve and think.
I'm curious. So, what I hear you saying, Julie, is as a leader, I need to be prepared in some of those soft skills or those leadership skills. Like that foundation is really important to be able to transfer and move over. What responsibility do you think lands on the employee and the emerging leader to find and develop those skills versus the organization? And where do those best come together?
Yeah. We talk about that development is a shared responsibility, a shared accountability, right? So the employee is really in the lead, right? It's up to the employee to identify how am I performing? What am I interested in? Um, what am I committed to? Like, how much of a commitment do I want to make to do this? So that's the employee responsibility. We also talk about the leader has a responsibility as well to engage in those conversations with the employee, to provide the feedback, in some condition, in some spaces, to provide the conditions or the context for employees to explore those areas as well. I think the third leg of that stool is the human resources team, which also then is about building those leadership skills and having those conversations, and also, providing some of the tools for the employees to develop. So I really, we talk about it as a shared accountability with the employee and the lead, right? Like you own your career, you own your development. Nobody's going to make that happen for you. If you're interested in something, our CEO says this, like nobody can read your mind. Step into the conversation and say it, right? Use your words, um, and then also, be clear with yourself what you're committed to do and what you're willing and interested in doing.
I think for a lot of young leaders, I'm saying young, but like maybe late 20s or some folks that have given quite a lot to an organization, sometimes leadership opportunities or growth can come at a like the company is willing to give you the opportunity, but it's also going to take more work from you as a team member as well that may lead to a path for greater compensation or big greater title or that kind of thing, but it doesn't happen right away. You've got to give first. What advice would you have for someone in that kind of situation? Like, when is it worth it to, yes, like employee give first and then see the reward, or versus knowing when, like, hey, this doesn't feel right. I think especially with a lot of young people, there is a like as soon as you give more responsibility, you expect to get more from the company.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a one for one relationship, right? Talk about ability, aspiration, and commitment, right? So that's how we think about potential, and as we evaluate kind of where are people at and what's their potential in their career, what's their ability, in other words, what do they have the skills and knowledge to do, what's their aspiration, what do they want to do over time, and what's their commitment, which is the part that you're asking about, do I want to put in the time, right? Those things fluctuate over time. So what I would say is there's no one answer to that. There's your answer. So I've had points in my career where I was working on my ability. I was pretty clear about my aspiration, but the commitment that I could give to it at that time for various reasons just wasn't there. So I stepped back a little bit, right? And then that changed. Life circumstances change, right? And then I could lean in a little bit more and demonstrate more of that commitment. But I would encourage people to think about those three components, right? You can be working on your ability in multiple different ways. Be self reflective about what's your aspiration, and know that it's okay if your commitment changes because of life over time. But when is that right for you? And I think you gotta play the long game, right? You might get one opportunity now, and maybe it's not the right time because you can't make that commitment. It might come along again. It might not, right? But I think it's a think about the longer term, and maybe you need to make the commitment because now is the right time, and it'll play out in, you know 3 to 5 or 7 years, whatever that timeline may be. But what's right for you is going to change over the course of your life at different points, I think, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, Julie, you talked about being really clear on your aspiration. What would you share with someone who is like, maybe I don't know what I want next, or I know what it is, but I'm like loosely holding it because I want to grow as much as possible. How specific should you get on what that aspiration really looks like? Should I be like, yes, I know I want this job title, or what should that look like as you define what maybe the pinnacle or ultimate career goal kind of looks like?
Yeah. When I have people ask me that question, my coaching to them is think about what doors you want to remain open. So it's not always about, if you know there's a specific title that you want, great. Recognize it might not be a straight line. It might not be your straight line to get there, right? Again, you got to broaden. Life happens, right? Opportunities might arise, might not arise. So if you've got an aspiration that's a specific thing, that's great. We can talk about whether that should be a title or not. I've got a different point of view on that, but that's fantastic. If you're not sure, I think that's okay. I mean, I can't say that I spent, again, early in my career, I'm going to be a CHRO. I would not have said that. But I also was thoughtful about, do I want that to be a possibility at some point? Yeah, I think I do. Okay, so then what do I need to do to keep that door open so that the possibility at the right time and place does it line up with my aspiration, my commitment? I'm working on my ability. Um, Again, that long game. So that's what I would say. If you're not quite sure, I'm not sure what I want my career to be. Okay, what doors do you want to remain open? And how do you make moves? How do you be thoughtful about your development to keep those doors open?
Hmm, I like that. It makes it like possible to feel like there's multiple journeys that you can go on
Yeah,
in your career and you don't have to pick the right path
right,
right now.
right. Yep, yep.
Awesome. What advice do you have for leaders who are managers and trying to be good coaches to their team members? Trying to balance, okay, how do I balance performance with also making sure I'm investing in my people in the right way?
I would think about your role as manager, which is about making sure a particular body of work gets done, to shifting to a leader, which is about the outcome, but helping people think about how to get that work done. So your role shifts from telling somebody exactly what to do, to more of a, I need this outcome. Let's talk about how you're going to get there so that they can develop their own. That's the development, right? It's moving through that ambiguity of, I'm not quite sure how to do this, and I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm telling you what to think about, or helping you think about what you need to do. Um, so that's what I would say is step back and think about, are you directing or are you coaching? Are you helping people think and ask questions? Or are you giving them the answer? Um, and sometimes being more in that questioning space and thinking, or just simple questions like, tell me how you're thinking about this, will move into more coaching and development for people.
For someone who is in a role that is looking to grow into people management, that can be a tough shift. But also, how can those individual contributors signal that they are ready or good potential to be people leaders? What are skills or ways that they can show up in the workplace to signal? I've obviously talked to your manager, I think, but how can they show some of those skills or some of that, like, what do they need to be able to show that, like, hey, yes, I'm ready to take this on or this next step?
Yeah, I think they need to show they can be collaborative and that they are good listeners. I think they need to show that they're willing to step into something that's not very well defined, right? Because leadership doesn't come with a rule book. So you've got to be able to live in that space of sort of, I don't know what the next step is here. A good way to demonstrate some of that is to step into just project leadership too. What are those informal leadership roles that you can demonstrate, or um, just different project opportunities that give you the opportunity to show, I'm collaborative, I'm listening, the team is following me, right? They don't have to, but I've got some good followership here. Um, so those are some things that I would think about how to demonstrate that on a kind of, not quite at the scale of actually leading teams, but those foundational capabilities.
Yeah. I think one of the things you've continued to bring up is the ability to deal with
Mhm.
ambiguity. And I think that's so real in a leadership role
Yes.
because there's lots of things that get thrown your way that there is no playbook
Yep.
or
Yep.
handbook for. I'm curious, do you have a time in your career where you can talk about dealing with ambiguity and when something was maybe came across your plate that was like, I didn't know how to deal with this, but here is how we worked through it?
Sometimes I feel like that happens every day. Um, a specific example of ambiguity. I remember moving into a role. This is when one of our business units was the crop inputs business was just forming. It was a merger that came together of two different businesses, and um, I was offered the HR leadership role in that business, and there was a lot of ambiguity because it was like two sides of the business that were like standing next to each other, but not really integrated and not really working together. Um, so my role as part of the leadership team was to figure out how we were pulling that together as an integrated business. Um, and there was, when I remember, if I think back on that, there was like this whole series of things that probably needed to be done, but no order to it at all. So I think that was a good opportunity to step back again with my team and just start chunking it away, right? What's out there? What do we know? What do we know are going to be the places we should? What don't we know? Um, and then just start making a plan that honestly continued to unfold the further we walked into it. So it was a little bit of acknowledging that there's a lot here, simplify it into, all right, what's something that we can do that will be impactful? Let's start there, and then just letting it unfold. And so it was dealing with sort of making some sense of that ambiguity, but also knowing the ambiguity was right there at the edge. Like we kept stepping closer to it as well.
Mhm. Yeah. I think it, especially with integrations, like it's getting
Yeah,
comfortable with knowing that what you don't know and that no one else knows either. And
yeah,
together we're
yeah,
going to put together the pieces of the puzzle.
yep. And just start, right?
Yeah. I think that's really good advice, Julie, because I think sometimes that can be the most overwhelming part when you don't know what to do,
Yeah,
or you may
yeah,
not even be clear on what the right outcome or the goal is, but getting started. What's the
yeah,
first step?
yeah. Because it's not going to get better just looking at it, right? And I think there's also like give yourself some grace for you might not get it right the first time. That's okay. Now you know something different. Now you know something more for the next time that the next step that you take. And that's okay as well. I do think there's sometimes we apply this pressure on ourselves as leaders of, I need to know everything. I've got it all perfected. I need to just deliver it. And that's not realistic. It's an impossible standard to hold yourself to. So give yourself some grace to learn. We're all learning.
And I think too, I think about leaders that I admire too. They they know a lot of things, but they don't pretend to know it all. And I think that can be the most refreshing and sometimes even validating thing to follow in a leader is when they're like, "Hey, here's what I don't know, and let's figure it out together." Because working with someone who does know it all and is like, "This is the way," that's hard to collaborate with sometimes.
But I think it's hard when you're a new leader to that's a growth space, right? Because you're an individual contributor, so you do know, right? You know everything intimately. Now you're a leader and you don't know, but you're sort of tuned into, but I need to know. I've always known, so therefore now I know. And so I think that's a big developmental step that all of us need to go through. I went through in my career. Um, So that can be a big stretch in moving into a leadership role, is just recognizing that your role is no longer to know everything, it's to lead the team.
Mhm. And I think it is probably the first step in a long journey of getting uncomfortable with what we have talked about as ambiguity, but also just being really uncomfortable. Is that like that's a not fun space to be in when you're used to knowing all the answers and you don't anymore.
Yeah.
And then I think there only becomes more scenarios like that throughout your career, and they become bigger and hairier
Yes. Oh
the
yeah.
higher up you go.
I remember at one point in my career, um, a leader telling me, "That's good. I'm glad you're uncomfortable. There's growth and discomfort." And I remember thinking, "Yeah, I could use a little less of that." Like,
I had to give myself a pep talk recently of like, if I'm not uncomfortable, I'm not growing. So I should lean into this feeling.
yes, yes, yep.
Yeah. Julie, I am curious. I'm sure in your years of working with people and developing people, you have used a robust toolkit for people leadership and leadership development. What are some of your favorite tools or books or resources that you like to direct people to and even use at Land O'Lakes?
Hmm. Um, looking over at my bookshelf right now. There's one book that resonated a lot with me that I've referred a lot of people to. It's called Quiet. It's by Susan Cain. Um, so it's about the power of being an introvert. Because I think a lot of times there's this notion that all leaders are highly extroverted, and there's just like we apply a connotation to that, right? And this book is really, as a major introvert myself, right, it was really reaffirming about like there's a lot of value that introverts bring. So I think that's a leadership book that I refer my fellow introverts too on a regular basis. Another thing that I'll say that we're doing now at Land O'Lakes that is the brainchild of my team that I think is a great tool is we're doing what we call a master class series. So it's directed at our directors and above as we invest in their development. And it's about having senior leaders, so some of my peers, just do a webinar about their own leadership journey, what they went through, how they learned, pivotal points in their career, challenges they faced. So I think of that as it's a really good tool because people can learn from the stories of others. Um, so I think that's another tool that I encourage when those that series is done about twice, 2 or 3 times a year, and I always encourage people to sign up for it or to listen to the recording because it's just a great way to learn from others as well.
I bet it's a great way for the team to connect with senior leaders
Oh
too,
yeah,
of just like,
yes,
oftentimes, like, when you see senior leaders, it's like at a large town hall or, on
yeah,
some stage or something like that, but to hear the real stories of them, that's neat.
yep, yep.
So what are the key takeaways from Julie's masterclass?
I haven't done one. I haven't been asked yet. I think it's because it's my team that's doing it, so they're working their way through the entire. They keep asking me to approve other leaders. I'm like, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that one's good. Nobody's asked me yet, so we'll see.
Does it make the pressure worse because now you know what everyone else has done?
Um, no, I've listened to most of them, and there's just some wonderful stories, and like you said, getting to know people more personally and their humor and just sort of um, unfiltered a little bit is always a good, refreshing place to
Mhm.
be too.
Yeah. So I'm curious, along those lines, Julie, what advice would you give to what you know now? What advice would you give to a younger Julie on her leadership journey?
I would say um, you don't have to be perfect. I think that's one I still struggle with all the time. Um, I would say one that I remind myself that I learned early in my career, that I've told others as well, is listen to what others see in you. Sometimes we're so self-critical that it's hard to see our own contributions and strengths. And every once in a while, you'll get someone who will tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you should think about this over here." And instead of discounting that, listen to what they're saying. I will say some of the greatest opportunities I've had in my career is because somebody took the time to do that. Um, and I very quickly wanted to say, "What are you talking about?" But I gave it a shot, and they were fantastic opportunities. Again, because they were seeing something in me or something that they thought they could develop in me, and it and they turned out to be great experiences. So I would tell my younger self to um, listen to that listen to that sooner. Maybe don't be so skeptical. Yeah.
That's good advice. Thanks for sharing. Um, Julie, so one that we've talked about personal development, I'm curious about as we think about really building high performing teams, uh, and as leaders who are focused on, okay, how do I build a team or a really good team culture? um, I'm curious first, what are your like top tips for culture building of high performing teams?
So when you say teams, right, I think of kind of smaller intact teams, and I think the place to start there for me is always the relationships that the team has. So there's always the work to be done, but I do think that as humans, we need to get to know each other a little bit, right? That's how we build trust, right? That's how we build. Land O'Lakes is a heavy relationship based organization, and people want to know a little bit about each other, right? What makes you tick? What do you think about? Everybody shows up as a whole person, so what's that whole person you? So I always encourage leaders, particularly of new teams, to let some of that happen. The team might have been there, but you're new, so now there's a new team. So we have some good tools that we use with leaders to help them integrate into a new team or help new teams integrate. So I would always say start there. If you build that trust, the relationships across the team, they'll achieve amazing things. Um, but you got to spend the time intentionally doing that as well.
Yeah. Uh, I'm going to flip that around. What mistakes do you see leaders make in attempting to build culture or build teams? Or most common mistakes, I think I'll ask.
Yeah, I don't think telling ever works very well. So I'm new to the team. I'm going to lead the team. This is the way we're going to be. That there's always more ownership if the team can organically build that. So with some facilitation, right? Build how we want to be together. Um, and I think new leaders, particularly earlier in career, and again, I think I probably did some of this as well, want to come in and like, again, you're coming in as that expert, right? I know how to do this. I know how to get it done. I've read a book about leadership. I've gone to a class about leadership. Therefore, here I am as the leader. Doesn't work that way, right? These are actually people, um, and people don't want to be told what to do, right? They want to contribute. They want to show up fully. They've got expertise. So listening, building the team goes a lot further.
So, what you're talking about, Julie, takes time.
Yep.
And in a business, time is money, and it's an investment to do things like team building and relationship building and leadership development. What value do you think some of this work, or this work in general, whether it's leadership development or team building type of work, has on the P&L?
I think it drives the P&L. I think if the team can't show up fully, we're going to lose the contributions of those individuals, right? We're going to lose, either they'll leave the organization, they'll be less engaged, and there's numerous studies, right, about how engagement impacts business productivity. I think we also you lose what that team or what that individual could become in the future. So that has an impact as well. So the investment up front in building the team, building the culture, building leadership skills will pay off. It doesn't all have to be done at one time, right? It's not like we're saying, okay, so I'm out. Everybody's going to stop for 2 days and we're going to focus on team building. It's it's a bit more organic than that, right? And you got to start where you are, but pay attention to it and do that intentionally, right? Have your team, if you're doing something with your team, maybe quarterly you're doing a step back to say, all right, how are we doing? We set these norms for how we want it to be. Are we doing all right on those? Do we need to adjust them? I mean, it can be something as simple as that. It could be something as simple as let's have lunch together, right? It doesn't need to be intense.
Yeah. I think what you're getting at is it should be more of your day to day and like business as usual than it always has to be like I mean, not that the retreats and stuff can't be fun, but
Yeah. But it doesn't have to be costly, right?
yeah.
And it doesn't have to be uncomfortable and it doesn't have to be a big deal. It's just how you're leading the team.
Mhm. Another question I am curious from your perspective on, Julie, is for those leaders, maybe approaching more of that enterprise level or who are leading teams, what do you wish that leaders knew about partnering with HR and how to partner well with HR?
I would say earlier is better, right? But I think truly partnering to me means we're not throwing things over the wall at each other. It means we're having a discussion about what's the work that needs to happen, what's the change that needs to occur, and why. What's the outcome you're trying to drive in the business? All right, now how do we line up the talent to achieve that as well? So I think those that truly starting with the outcome that we want to drive to, pulling in your HR partner because they've got people expertise, and you're not going to achieve that business outcome without the people, without the team. Um, so have them help you. Let them help you shape that talent strategy um, and the capability.
I think that comes back to what we talked about in like it's okay to not know everything
Yeah,
and
right.
lean
Yeah,
on people.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. The thing that any HR person is going to not like is, hey, I made this decision. Will you just go execute this? Like,
Uh,
think nobody wants to show up,
no one
right?
wants that.
Right? Like, think of your HR partner, your finance partner, your technology partner as part of your team. Would you do that to any of your other team members? Probably not.
Well, thank you. Okay, Julie, I want to move into what we call the rapid fire segment of the podcast, where Try to answer in one sentence or less, and I will do my best not to ask follow-up questions. So, quick answers only.
Okay.
What is something you had to unlearn to become a better leader?
That I have to know all of it, that I have to do all of it.
What is one leadership habit that has made the biggest difference in how you lead others?
I think intentional reflection and building my own self awareness of how I show up.
What is one word that you would use to describe the future of leadership in agriculture?
You got to be resilient. There's a lot of change happening, there's a lot of unexpected things all the time. And you've got to be able to take those in stride, stay curious about them, and take a step forward.
Oh, okay. I have a follow-up question here. I always say I try not to ask follow-up questions.
Mhm.
We talk about this, and I feel like a lot of leaders have talked about, like, if you want to be successful in agriculture, you got to be able to deal with change and
Yeah.
that resiliency. Okay, as you work at being a resilient leader, how do you find the right mix of when do you just soldier on because like that is part of it versus some of these things are really hard and there is an emotional toll to being a leader, and when do you grieve the change and give yourself time to process and step back as part of resiliency? Like, is resiliency to you a combination of those two things?
I don't know if I have a good answer to that. Here's what's coming to my mind. Resiliency is sometimes it is. I don't know that I have a good answer to that, Nicole.
That's okay. I'm curious. Yeah, what is resiliency? Like, what does that
But
look
the only
like
thing
to you?
that's going through my mind right now is you got to self manage through some of those things, right? And you learn through your career a little bit of judgment about, okay, I don't necessarily like that, but I know in the larger scheme of things, I'm not going to sweat it, right? And you build a little bit of wisdom or self knowledge about when to just let it go, because in the larger scheme of things, or the outcome that you're trying to get to, or what's really important, it won't matter in the long run, right? There's also a moment of you've got to, you can't be on all the time, right? So sometimes your resiliency is also determined by how are you sleeping? How are you taking care of yourself, right? How are you balancing out the rest of your life with the stress that can be work sometimes? So that's what I think about with resilient. Those feel like two sort of unrelated things. So I don't know if it's a good answer to your question, but I think of resiliency across that, sort of knowing when to just let it go and knowing when you need to self manage with I just got to step back here a minute. And if it's grieving, if it's yeah, whatever that is for you,
Just being frustrated because
frustrated,
it's
I
yeah,
don't like it, like whatever
yeah.
that is. I think at some point though, you got to make a leadership decision about if you're part of a leadership team and there's been a a decision to move forward in a direction. You're part of the team and you need to own that decision, express your point of view about it, but own the decision as a leadership team and step forward with the rest of your peers. So what I would say is not resilient is sort of continuing to hold on to something that the team has decided we're going to move on from.
That was great. Thank you, Julie. I know we like worked through that together, but I love what you had to say there.
All right.
Okay, I will go back to not asking follow-up questions. Two more rapid fire. I'm I'm the worst at rapid fire. I always have follow-up questions. Okay, what is a leadership skill every manager should be working on right now?
Curiosity. Is it a skill or a trait? I don't know, but challenge yourself to stay open and ask, okay, what if, yeah,
What is one belief about leadership you've changed your mind on?
that leaders know all the answers.
I like it. We have a theme here. Okay, Julie. At AFA, we love hot takes. So these are unconventional, bold opinions, either about leadership or the future of agriculture. And we are curious, what is a hot take that you have on leadership or the future of ag?
um, I think one brand I think that the agriculture industry gets sometimes is that it's old fashioned or set in its ways or slow to move. Um, and I'm not experiencing that with what I do every day, right? Um, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of dynamic technology things happening in this in agriculture, and I do think having family members who are involved in farming, working for this organization, like there's continuous, like how do we make it better? How do we make it more efficient? How do we continue to grow? And I think that's not a new thing, right? We're, as I mentioned at the start of this, we're a cooperative that's a little over 100 years old, and we're not unique as a little over 100-year-old cooperative. There's a number of them, right? So those businesses wouldn't have lasted had they not sort of moved along at pace, right? So
I like it. As we've talked about, agriculture is constantly changing and need to be resilient to that if you're going to lead in the future. Okay, Julie, you know at AFA we are all about building bridges, so and connecting people. Where can listeners connect with you or learn more about the work that is happening at Land O'Lakes?
well, there's always our Land O'Lakes Inc. website. We, particularly from a human resources, a talent perspective, we've always got things out there. I think LinkedIn is another good place, whether it's myself or the LOL Inc. And I think we're also doing things on Facebook or Instagram as well, right? We're trying to share our stories. We're really proud of the employee experience that we're creating, so we're sharing some more and more of our employee stories, and it's always great to hear directly from them, right? That like that's going to be more meaningful than anything I can say. So follow us there.
I don't know, Julie. I think you've had many meaningful things to share with us throughout this podcast episode. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing about, that leaders don't have to know everything, but to always be curious and find different ways to learn. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Cultivating Leaders podcast. Thanks for listening to the Cultivating Leaders podcast, where leaders grow. If this episode challenged your thinking, be sure to share it with someone else who is on a similar leadership journey. You can stay connected with the Cultivating Leaders podcast by following Ag Future America on social media or drop a comment in the episode description. We'll see you again on the next episode.